Why, hello there, old sports. Now, this is also not the video I said was going to be coming out next, but, I'm working on it. Cut me some slack here, please. I'm working on it. Regardless, unfortunately, I had another thought that I wanted to talk about. So, we're talking about Toriel today, and the differences between the characters in Undertale and Deltarune. This video can kind of be seen as a companion piece to my Sans video I did, which now that I'm thinking about it, I can now see the irony in that idea. Regardless, this is probably going to be one of the last videos I make that doesn't have my 100% effort put into it for a bit, because I'm working on that big Undertale video, and that's kind of taken a lot out of me, so sorry if this video isn't the highest quality ever. I hope it's good enough. Anyways, let's begin. I think Toriel is a very interesting character, and she's a very good avenue in which to explore the ideas that the characters in Undertale and Deltarune may have similar inherent traits, but the lives they've lived and the things they've experienced will definitely shape them in very different ways. The simplest and easiest to explain example would be how in Undertale, Toriel is overprotective to a fault because she's lost so many children in her life. She lost Asriel, she lost Kara, she lost the 6 humans, and then she almost lost Frisk. So that's at least 8 kids that she lost in that time alone. So by the time we meet her in Undertale, she is extremely overprotective. Honestly, it feels like the only reason Toriel even acts nice to monsters in Undertale is just because we may be their friends and she doesn't want to ruin our friendships. Because while it makes sense that she would be willing to attack Asgore because he murdered 6 kids, and Flowey because when she found him, he was in the process of trying to murder us, when it comes to just like a random Frogget that hadn't done anything, she didn't need to be all mean to it. Compare this to Toriel and Deltarune, who's borderline neglectful, if not just straight up neglectful. She doesn't keep track of where Chris is half the time. The only time we actually really see her care about where they are is when we are exiting the school in Chapter 1, and she says she waited in the parking lot for a whole 30 minutes. It's not like you could have just gone into the school and looked for where your missing child was, Toriel. Toriel also allows Chris to carry a knife around for some reason, and regardless of if it's justified or not, or has some sort of backstory or reason to why she allows them to have it, Toriel in Undertale would never let her child carry around a knife. Quick addendum to that last thought. Kara had a knife, but that was mostly a gardening tool, and it wasn't initially intended to be a weapon, so it would make sense why they were allowed to have that, considering they seemed to like gardening with Asgore. Then there's also the whole Jitterbug scene, which, I doubt I need to get into a whole discussion about that again, but, my thoughts on it have kind of changed and evolved a little bit as time has gone on and I've had more time to think about it. I don't necessarily completely agree with what I said in that previous video on Sans. Regardless of if the two were doing anything more than dancing, if you get what I mean, they shouldn't have been making so much noise to the point where Chris had to stuff their head in a pillow to drown it out. And yeah, it's completely reasonable if Toriel is kind of having a rough time, especially considering her ex won't stop bothering her. But then again, she should just kind of, it feels like she's kind of dodging the conversation instead of just shutting him down sometimes. So, I feel like, at least on that end, both sides of the Toriel Asgore thing need to just sit down and have a discussion. But regardless, if Toriel wanted to get drunk and go dance with a friend she just met, she shouldn't do that in the house her child is trying to sleep at, that's just not really responsible. Apologies, I probably don't need to re-explain this. You're probably mature, or I hope you're mature enough to understand what I'm trying to get at here. Now, I'm not sure how to necessarily word the next section, because I fear I could come off the wrong way, but I will try my best. In Undertale, all of the characters start out at a lot of a lower point than they are in Deltarune, but by the end, once they come to terms with their problems and they've suffered, and then they achieve a happy ending, they're greater than, or I feel like they're happier than they even are in Deltarune at the start. Now, I don't want to say suffering is necessary for growth, because that kind of feels gross to say, but at least in terms of being shaped and going down different paths, the suffering that the characters have experienced in Undertale that is absent in Deltarune very much explains why they act differently. Keep in mind, this may also just be because we get to see more of these characters in Undertale, so they're a bit more fleshed out than their Deltarune counterparts. So we get to know more of how they live in the underground than how they do in Hometown. I don't think Toriel in Deltarune is necessarily a bad person, but she's definitely taken actions that aren't defensible. Now again, that doesn't make her irredeemable, that just means she's made bad decisions, and we've all done that. We can also come back to that whole idea that Undertale fans go into Deltarune with all these preconceived ideas of how the characters are supposed to act, and then when they don't act like that, they get upset, or confused, or they just don't let the characters breathe, because again, the story isn't finished yet. People have an idea of how Toriel would act as a parent, but that idea comes from Undertale, where she's had to bury her own children, and she's had to sit alone in isolation for years and years on end, and then she had to learn and grow to put aside her own worries for her children, to let them be free, and let them be safe, and then realize that she had to not let them go completely, but not keep close to them completely. She had to find a middle ground, and by the end of Undertale, she's found that middle ground, and she's happier, and Frisk is happier. But if I were to assume some things in Deltarune, think about it, Asriel is kind of implied to have been this kind of golden child who is always a prodigy, or not necessarily a prodigy, he was just always kind of popular, he was good enough at everything, he got awards, he got sports stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of helped raising Chris to some extent as well, like, if any of the problems Toriel may have had with parenting were kind of supplemented by Asriel to some extent. And that's just if we assume things were going well, which, let's be honest, they weren't, because by the time we find Chris at the beginning of the game, they were very isolated, very lonely, very sad probably, and yes, part of that is definitely due to our influence over them, or the soul's influence, because it appears the soul was part of their existence before we come to inhabit it, but that's a whole nother can of worms I don't necessarily want to open right now. I guess my ultimate point here is that Toriel in Undertale and Toriel in Deltarune are two completely different characters. Or, not completely, but they're two different characters. They may share a name, they may share a face, they may share families, and they may share some personality traits, but they've lived two different lives in their own worlds. I guess I just don't understand how people can say seeing things like the Jitterbug scene ruined Toriel for them. I can see how it ruins Toriel for you in Deltarune, but I don't see how that affects her in Undertale when she's lived a different life in Undertale, and maybe wouldn't make those same decisions that would make those bad outcomes happen. But as I was saying, different people live different lives, even if some of them are similar. So, if you feel differently than me, that is completely okay, and that is completely valid. I hope I'm not trying to stomp on anyone's toes or anything. That is not my intention, and if I did do that, then I failed to communicate my thoughts properly, and I apologize. Before we go, I'd like to say a thank you to our sponsors, and by sponsors, I mean my Patreon members. Sven Biscuit and Skill Issue 22822. Thank you for your support, please have a good day, all that good stuff. And of course, to everyone else, thank you for your time today, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe, do all that good stuff. My huge Undertale video essay I've been working on for like the last month, 2 months maybe, I've lost track of time. That video should be coming out somewhat soon, and I hope it will be really good, because I'm trying to put a lot of effort into it, and I've rewrote the script like 4 times. So, well, obviously, putting effort into something doesn't necessarily make it better, but I'm trying to make it better. And to make things better, you need to put in effort, but putting in effort doesn't mean it's better. It's like a rectangle and a square sort of situation. I'm rambling too much. Thank you for your time. Have a good day.